We're recording. There,
Ah, there we go.
there.
I think a lot
Now,
depends on whose meeting it is.
now we're recording.
Now we're recording. Well, Dr. Robert Frost, thank you so much for joining me from southern Mexico. Wonderful beach there to participate in my countdown to the moon project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm at San Agustinino, about as far south as you can be in Mexico, at the same height as Nicaragua. My doctor is in psychology. I have degrees in psychology, biology, and physics. I've created the world's easiest to play musical instrument. It uses just a number keypad or your computer keyboard to play chords and notes. I'm a student of Kabbalah and Western mysteries, a delightful thing of mine. I'm a research scientist. I've discovered a way to counteract some of the negative effects of 5G, which is real helpful. And that's another one of my projects. And right now I'm working on getting rid of people's back pains. My business mentor, Mark Joyner, said, do you have anything that has really wow factor? I said, well, you know, in about a minute work, I can make most anyone's pain go away. And he said, oh, really? And he said, your homework is to get 20 videos of people after treatment going, oh my God, the pain is gone. And I've gotten off my duff and gotten over my shyness and been approaching people. I got 7 videos yesterday. A pregnant woman with low back pain, her pain was completely gone and she was really happy. I met a woman who's into manifesting and she had a nerve pinch. And in the morning, she did her manifesting practice to find a therapist who could get rid of her pain. And I approached her at the beach and said, can I get rid of your pain? She said, you're the answer to my prayer. So I got rid of her nerve pinch. And so I'm doing those projects. So right now I'm trying to corral myself in to just do one thing until it's actually bringing in money. I tend to spread myself out too much with all these crazy things I can do. I'm naturally very good at a whole lot of things, so I have to limit myself in order to actually produce some serious results.
Yeah, it is difficult. People who are multi-talented, it's hard to maintain focus.
Yeah, but I'm working hard on keeping my strength. I just turned 72 and I did over 30 overhand pull-ups. So I'm able to surf still and having the balance and coordination. With Michael Mooney, son of a nutritional formulator in Hollywood, we created a business called Age Reversal Now, with a combination of nutrients and exercise and all the different things to improve your powers of recuperation. I've been able to reverse a lot of the things of you know, my mental faculties. You know, I was getting to where I'd walk into a room and go, what was I looking for in here? Now when that happens more than 3 times in a week or 2 times in a day, I know it's time to take a few nootropics. Take centrophenoxine, about 300 milligrams for 3 days in a row. My brain peps right up like 20 or 30 again. It lasts 3 or 4 months before I have to do it again. So it's pretty neat. So these ways of stimulating your brain to produce and release acetylcholine, the chemical you're using for focusing, they work really well. You just have to supply yourself with the raw materials, choline from lecithin or some source, and you could really crank your body and your mental functions back to like it was when you're a lot younger, literally reducing the average age of the cells of your body. And so I'm kind of the poster boy for Age Reversal Now, you know, having a 6-pack and some nice muscles and still surfing and doing crazy things that only kids do. So that's another one of my businesses that I'm ignoring right now, to just work on back pain, just getting rid of people's back pain.
Well, I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit because I'm only 46, about to turn 47, and I walk into a room and go, "What am I doing here now?" So, I definitely would like to. Is there any like downside to this therapy?
For example, if you don't eat enough choline in your diet, and you stimulate your brain to produce and release acetylcholine, you get into a deficit where you don't have the raw materials, and then you get a headache. But it just tells you, hey, I don't have the raw materials here. So there are some downside. It depends on the things. That my partner, he's a lot more experimental than I. He tried an experimental drug to regain the color of his hair, and his gray hair turned black, but he got ugly scabs and wounds on top of his scalp too. He said, we're a couple iterations away from the exact molecule. We may have to add an acetyl group to it before we do this. So some of this are experimental and can cause trouble. This, you know, personal biohacking. For example, I learned that zinc really helps to kill viruses. And I had some viral cold problems, so I took zinc, but I took way too much for too long. And as a result, unknowing, I created a copper deficiency, which caused my hair to turn white when I was pretty young. So yes, you have to be very careful in what you're doing when you're biohacking and adding, particularly if you're adding particular minerals. I would say this: anything that you find that solves your problems and is really good for you should only be cycled, i.e., used for a while and then stopped. Because anything that improves your health or functioning works by encouraging certain physiological pathways and inhibiting other ones. And those ones that are inhibited need to happen sometimes. So if you keep taking it, you get problems from inhibiting those functions. So whatever the nutrient or herb or mushroom or thing you think is really the thing, you should take it for a while and then stop for a while. That's the biggest advice I've learned, because anything you do all the time is going to end up causing problems, except maybe, eating and drinking water and sleeping, breathing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I often think of the human body as being like this ecosystem, and you could perturb it for a while, but you need to let it get back into some type of balance.
Yes, exactly so. And so even though I take a lot of vitamins and minerals, I take a couple of months each summer where I don't take any of those. And I just eat all the fresh fruits and vegetables that are available then, just so my body gets out of the habit. When I was working in Switzerland and Germany, I worked in a medical clinic in Switzerland where the doctors sent me all their impossible patients. And what I found is a whole lot of them had strong reactions to milk and wheat. And they said, well, that couldn't be a problem. I've eaten that every day of my life, all my life. And that's the problem. The body finally says, hey, man, give me a break, and starts producing symptoms if you keep doing the same thing always.
What do you think about intermittent fasting?
I think it's a good idea. I think you probably should also do some real fasting, like 2 or 3 day fasts. Intermittent fasting is very helpful. Your body does need to go into apoptosis, where it feeds on its old dead cells or old worn out cells or old cancerous cells, etc. But intermittent fasting usually doesn't last long enough for you to go really into ketosis and into apoptosis, where you're eating up your own cells. If you don't exercise, it takes about 2 days of fasting before you reach that bottom line where you don't have anything to eat. Interesting what happens then. Your sensory perceptions get far more acute. You could literally see another line down on the eye chart. And if you didn't have this thing of your senses getting really heightened when you're starving for 2 days, you wouldn't be here if your parents didn't have that quality, because you turn into a lean, mean hunting machine when you're hungry, and you find food and you bring it home and the family survives. And if you didn't have that quality, evolutionarily, you wouldn't have survived. But because of people having refrigerators and grocery stores, nobody goes without food for longer than 2 days anymore. And as a result, they don't go down into this heightened function. What I found is that what I do, because I lose weight too fast if I fast, and I don't have that much fat to lose, so I lose my hard-earned muscle. So I exercise hard at the start of my fast and burn up the sugar I have stored in my liver and in my muscles. So my body goes into ketosis much faster. And so I can make use of that fasting time my body goes, gee, what am I going to eat? Well, how about these precancerous cells over here? How about these senolytic, senile cells where the telomeres are used up and they don't divide anymore, and they swell up and produce a lot of inflammatory chemicals. Don't get me wrong, you need some of that for signaling, but as you get old, you get too many of those. So killing them off is one of the most important things in age reversal. You kill off the senolytic cells, and your stem cells produce new baby cells that are 0 years old, and the average age of your bodies is going down. So it's a fascinating field, and it seems that most all of the medical biomarkers of aging, the amount of plaque on your arteries, the high density, low molecular weight lipids in your blood, all these things that increase with age, can be reversed by either chemical or behavioral means. My partner was lazy, and in order to kill off the senolytic cells, he took a weak dose of a lymphoma cancers, a lymph cell cancer therapeutic medicine, chemotherapy, along with quercetin. And he felt like crud for about 2 weeks, but he figured he'd done himself a lot of good killing off the senile cells. And I use fasting and just let my body feed on those and get rid of them myself without having to poison myself.
That is very fascinating. Everything you say makes sense to me.
Yeah. One of the big problems people make is just literally not taking breaks from eating. If you look at evolutionary, humans had feast and famine. You'd kill an animal and eat, and then you'd go without food for a while. And that was just how it was. And that keeps you in high health to go through those time of not eating. And if you're always eating and you're stuffing crud into your joints till you get arthritis. Another real interesting one, most people eat way too much of acid forming foods, meat, fruits, sugar, grains, and not enough of alkaline producing foods, which are mainly vegetables. Oh, if you eat half a grapefruit for breakfast, it'll have an alkaline response in the body. But if you have 7 oranges juiced in the afternoon, it gets way too acidic. The thing you can really trust are the vegetables. But I talked with Helmut Heine, the world's authority on fibromyalgia, brilliant German medical doctor. He got sucked up by one of the homeopathy companies and works for them. But he told me that this model is probably a little simple to be biochemically exactly true. But when your body is too acidic, chemicals that should remain in solution precipitate out. If they precipitate out into your joints, you have arthritis. If they precipitate out into your muscles, you have rheumatism. If they precipitate out into the junction where muscle turns into tendons, you have fibromyalgia. But the answer is to help make your body more alkaline, a little bit higher than 7 on the pH scale, so that you dissolve these things and keep them in solution. And he said he took electron photomicrographs of the tissue in fibromyalgia patients, right where the muscle turns into tendon, right where they hurt. And he found that the collagen, which usually has a structure of overlapping fish scales that are real sturdy and prevent stretching, it gives your connective tissues their strength, that in the places where people had fibromyalgia, the collagen was crystallized into hexagonal form. And I said, well, what causes this? He said, substance P, has some long name, but you can think of pain, comes down through the sensory nerve. It's interesting because sensory nerve sends signals up to the brain. A substance P comes down through the sensory nerve and then crystallizes the collagen where it reaches down that muscle tendon junction. And I said, well, what causes this to crystallize? He says, well, it's being too acidic in one thing. But the other thing is ungelöst psychische Ereignisse, which is something like unresolved traumas of the past. If you haven't resolved those traumas that are bothering you, you produce this substance P and you start crystallizing your collagen and producing pains and things like fibromyalgia. Fascinating, his work. And he said heavy exercise where you exercise anaerobically produces a lot of lactic acid, makes your body more acidic. But gentle exercise, like a brisk walk where you have to breathe a little harder than usual and you have to interrupt your talking a little bit, that's enough. That's enough to, you're exhaling carbon dioxide and getting rid of excess acidity. So you need that kind of exercise to help get rid of the excess acidity in your body. And it gets rid of lots of pains. I myself, I have a L4, my lumbar vertebrae is ½ inch forward of L5 from, I used the neighbor's trampoline when I was 10, when I was not allowed to. And I landed wrong and my chest and my hips hit me in the back of the head. And I broke my back. But I was so embarrassed about using it when I was not allowed and didn't want to get in trouble. I never told anyone. I didn't find out that I'd broken my back till I was in my 60s. I did sports all my life, and I probably would have been a lot better if I hadn't had this wrecked back. But around my 50s and 60s, I started getting sciatic nerve pain down my left leg, and it would sometimes feel like I got hit by lightning, and I'd just literally fall to the ground. And it bothered me daily for a couple of decades. I finally met a chiropractor who showed me exercises for strengthening my core muscles. And that, along with my age reversal improvements of diet, knock on wood, man, I don't have any pain now. I mean, if I exercise real hard, I have sore muscles for a day or two, but that's it. And another thing on that front, it got real popular to take antioxidants. Well, if you take antioxidants, you don't have pain after a hard workout. Sounds really good, but you don't have any muscle growth either. You need to have that burn after a workout in order to stimulate the muscles to grow. So you don't want to just dump your ton of antioxidants in you all the time, because again, you inhibit the good things you want to have happen. So it's an interesting balance. Everything has its plus and minus, and you have to learn how to respect it and give it its time.
And so I have a far out there question for you. Do you think there's any limits to how long a person can live?
Well, there is the Haflinger limit. It's kind of built in, and there are techniques where they hope to be able to overcome that. But there is and it has to do with just how many times your cells can divide before they wear out and stop dividing. And then there are techniques now where you can increase the telomere length on your muscles, which theoretically is going to increase your lifespan. But these things are new enough that we don't have people who have done it for enough years to know if you're really going to live a lot longer. All I know for sure is that you can maintain your health span where you're mentally and physically quite fit right up to the end. Whether you're going to actually live more years or not, well, I hope so, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about. I mean, health span's key. I mean, there's no point in living long if you're not really there to enjoy it.
Well, most people have 10 to 20 years of decrepitude at the end of their life now. They're living longer, but it's not worth it. So that's why I'm really working on this age reversal to increase your health span, if not your lifespan. I suspect I'm going to live a lot of extra years also, but we'll see.
So if I wanted to find out more about this and put together a good plan of action for myself, what would you recommend?
Well, I would go on Facebook and join my Age Reversal Now group and just go back through all the posts, because I post a lot of these techniques through there. If you go in Reddit and look at age extension and age reversal, people who are experimenting on themselves, it's fascinating. I read two men who they developed their own protocol for which nootropics to take so they can have 3 days of complete photographic memory. And it's different for everybody, but they found the formula, tweak it, and they can read the book and go to class and they know every word. They can look up the page and see it in their mind's eye. So there's people really working at this that are doing crazy things with their mental functioning that you wouldn't think possible. So Reddit is where there's the biohackers doing crazy things with themselves to learn what's on the cutting edge. But I would look at my Age Reversal Now group and ask questions there. I have that Age Reversal Now and agereversal.org are two of my groups that I have on Facebook, where I've shared a lot of the different biohacks that I do. For example, the mushroom lion's mane has been proven in 50 years of studies, PubMed studies, to be neurogenic. It grows new nerves, something they didn't think was possible. And Paul Stamets, the mushroom guy out of Oregon, has a protocol where you take a kind of a massive dose of lion's mane and a microdose of psilocybin mushrooms. You wait about 20 minutes and then you take a good solid dose of niacin, which opens up all your superficial blood capillaries and makes you flush like you're sunburned and drives that good lion's mane all around your body. And with it, he's been able to reverse peripheral neuropathy, this loss of sensation in your fingers and toes that diabetic patients often suffer from. Literally remyelinate the nerves. Lion's mane will grow new myelin. It's the insulation around your nerves, which would make it really helpful for people that suffer from the diseases of demyelination, Parkinson's and MS. So that's a real breakthrough. And I've been using that. Great results, both mentally improving the cognitive functioning, repairing my brain. I did a lot of psychedelics in the 60s and 70s, and I'm proud of the brain cells that survived it. But the lion's mane is helping me literally grow back neural connections and function like when I was younger again. Another one, cordyceps.
That's amazing.
And another one, cordyceps. The Russians first did experiments with this. They gave 6 grams a day to half of the group of, I guess they were military soldiers, 19 to 24. And after doing that for a couple of months, they ran them through a bunch of tests and found the people who had taken the cordyceps, their VO2, the amount of oxygen their blood can hold, improved by 50%. That's huge. So cordyceps is really helpful for increasing your endurance and giving you a lot more energy. So those are two things I mix into my morning coffee every day: cordyceps and lion's mane mushroom. If you take that niacin a little later, and I did the Stamets protocol for a while. You have to find a place where it's legal or where you can get the magic mushrooms. And microdose is about 100 to 150 milligrams. More than that, and I get spaced out and don't get a lot of work done. But down at that level, it's really useful. Just that microdose of psilocybin is another biohack trick. You take about 1/10 of the dose that would get you high, or you dissolve ego and get cosmic. 1/10 of the dose, your mind quiets down where you're just doing the thing you're doing, and you're not interrupted by extraneous thoughts. And I have a busy mind that has 1,000 extra thoughts. And so taking a little dose of the microdose of psilocybin quiets me down so I can focus on one project for 2 or 3 hours and get a tremendous amount of work done by really concentrating. Well, that's another biohack that if you can do where you are legally, or if you can, if you can go and pick them in the woods, it doesn't matter if it's legal. Where they grow it. A little dose is quite useful. Now, about once a year, I like to take a macro dose, like about 3 or 4 grams of the magic mushrooms, and dissolve my ego and merge into the universe and not be Robert for a while. And I don't do that more often than that because it's too discombobulating. I mean, it literally dissolves you. But the feeling that emerges is that the universe is doing what it needs to be doing. You're part of it, and everything is okay. And all the tensions and anxieties melt away, and you feel like it's all right. And that's really a beautiful awareness. So they found that a single dose will help people to get away from addictions. One single dose, and they don't smoke anymore. 80% of them. And they've never found anything that works with a single dose to do that before. But the psilocybin, however, it needs to be the amount where you really have the cosmic experience, where the personal self is dissolved and merged into the universe. Then you get these effects. Also, cluster migraine headaches, real problem for people. One big heavy dose of psilocybin, and those are gone for 6 months, medically proven. So that's becoming they're allowing experimental use of it for people with PTSD after they come home from Vietnam, and extremely effective. It's another powerful biohack. I live in Oregon where they grow, so it's pretty interesting.
How long are you down in southern Mexico for?
Well, I've been here since the start of November, and I'll be here till the end of November. I haven't bought my return flight, and I don't really have to return home, and it's freezing where I live in Oregon, so it's tempting to stay a little longer. So sometime early to mid-December, I'll go back. And I have bought 2.6 acres up there, and I have a spring where water comes right up out of the ground, makes a swamp full of watercress, extremely mineral rich and my favorite vegetable. And I'm transforming the land into a garden that can feed me. And I'll probably add chickens and rabbits so that I have eggs and meat. I'm taking seriously these what the news is telling us about delivery interruptions and food shortages. It seems that they're arranging for mass starvation throughout the world, and I want to be prepared for it so I don't starve. So that's kind of my big project right now, making myself self-sufficient enough to at least survive should things not be delivered anymore.
I think that's a good project just to, have a little bit more control over what you ingest, and then also to have better visibility into the true ecosystem necessary to support us.
Yeah. Yeah, the growing season is not so long where I live, but it's extremely fertile. Things grow very well. You can legally grow cannabis there, and my plants there this year were 9 to 11 feet and 5 or 6 feet wide. I use a little bit of cannabis sometime, but now I have way too much. I don't really know what to do with it all.
My cousin lives in Bend, Oregon. I hope to go visit her sometime. So
that's only about an hour and 10 minutes from me.
Okay, that's neat. Well, Dr. Frost, I had some questions about the moon I wanted to ask you.
Yes, I'm interested in what you're attempting to accomplish. By the way, I'm going to show you a giant wave as it comes in here.
Wow. That's what, about a yard or two tall?
No, about 2.5, I'd say, yards tall. On the front of the wave, it's about 8 to 10 feet, the big ones today. They measure it from the back, so that's probably about 6 feet. But if you're coming down the front, it doesn't matter that they call it 6 feet. You're falling 10 feet down the front.
Oh my goodness.
So what you're collecting information, just asking people what they think about going to the moon again. That's the big project coming up now.
That and the future of humanity, and kind of their interest in terms of personally going into space. So I guess that might be a good place to start with. Did you know that we're planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
Yes, I had heard that's a new project there. We want to get people there. It seems to me that Mars is more likely to be able to support us without so much effort, but with a dome that held air in, we could probably live on the moon also. I personally think that we ought to put a lot of our excess governmental money into renovating the Earth so that we can live here in health. But, eventually being able to live on other planets is going to be necessary if humanity is going to survive. The Earth's not going to live forever. The sun is not going to live forever. So learning to master space travel and being able to live other places, that makes sense. I'd like to see humanity survive. I kind of suspect that life has evolved like we have, many places in the universe, but they got to the stage we're in and discovered nuclear power and annihilated themselves. And I suspect that's been the case with a lot of advanced civilizations throughout the universe. And I hope it doesn't happen to humanity that way, but the game's up. How that turns out is still in question.
Going to Mars and living there seems like it initially would be a very challenging and dare I say miserable experience. And what would motivate somebody to do that? I sometimes think that the real motivation might be dealing with the natural challenges of Mars is better and easier and more acceptable than dealing with the human-made challenges here on Earth, like nuclear warfare. And I was wondering what you thought about that.
I think you're right. That humanity has developed the technology to be way too dangerous in comparison to their emotional maturity. So, there's a lot of religious groups who would like to see Armageddon sooner rather than later, so they can finally get out of this hellhole Earth and go to heaven. And I fear seriously that some extreme Christian or Muslim group will at least have a dirty bomb and be able to wipe a lot of humanity out in their seeking to create Armageddon.
Yeah, it is kind of funny to think about the type of logic and thinking that those thoughts have, in terms of no need to make the world better because it's supposed to get worse so that we can escape it.
Yeah. Yes, there is that popular thought. I would like to see humanity. We haven't really been a conscious civilization for very long. Humanity, evolutionarily speaking, is a pretty young race. And humanity seems to be acting like little kids in the backyard. One country says, it's my backyard, so unless I get to play, nobody gets to play. The other says, I have the ball and bat, the raw materials, so unless I get to play, nobody else gets to play. And another one says, I have the biggest guns, if you don't let me play, I'll beat the shit out of you. And that the countries of the world are kind of acting like little kids playing roughly in the backyard. And it's very immature, but humanity is a very young race. So if we can survive our infancy and not kill ourselves with our powerful weapons, I have hope for humanity's future.
Yeah, definitely. But it feels like our whole culture and kind of customs and morals are not conducive to driving that type of personal interaction on a individual scale, nor as we group up into countries.
What's made a difference? I spent most of my youth being extremely selfish, and I wasn't a very great father, and I'm not proud of it. And at this stage of life, I'm finding what brings me the greatest joy is reducing the suffering of others. This project of going around and asking people, do you hurt anywhere? Do you have any pain? Do you have a few minutes for me to get rid of it? And doing that, God, it's bringing me so much happiness. And people just lighting up like candles going, wow, my pain's better. Thank you. And it seems to me that the best way that you can make your own personal life as good as possible is to do as much good as you can for the people around you. Even if you're extremely selfish, if you think about it, being altruistic is the best way to make it good for yourself. And I'd like to see more humans wake up to that fact, that we are these social beings, and that by making the environment immediately around you and the people in it as good as possible, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, even if you're selfish.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I haven't done the math precisely, but I believe you were in your 20s in 1969 when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong landed on the moon in 1969. I was wondering.
19.
19. Okay.
I was born in 1950.
So I was wondering if what kind of impression that made on you.
Large impression. I was thoroughly amazed that we actually succeeded in doing that. I was really proud of our President Kennedy of pushing it and doing it because it's difficult. I think that's an amazing accomplishment. I don't really know what we'll do with it and what that will lead to. However, with our using fossil fuels to fuel our rockets, I mean, you use enough fossil fuel to send one person to the moon, it would run, New York City for a few weeks or something. It's huge, the energy expenditure. I wonder if some of the so-called free energy techniques, like of Tesla and something, if they really have been suppressed by the oil cartel in order to keep pumping the oil and earn their absurdly obscene amounts of profit. I think we do need to find other energy techniques. I look back at, how were the pyramids formed? These blocks that weighed like over 80 tons were moved over 500 miles, and then, like 300 or 500 feet up in the air into the pyramid. We don't know how they did that. They must have had some other kind of technology that we have lost. I think finding these technologies using sound vibration or something, that's an exciting area for research. There's got to be some way of powering our society that's not based on fossil fuels. And we don't have the technology yet to have solar power and wind power and ocean power do more than maybe 5 or 10% of the energy needs of our planet at this point. And even the United Nations, when they said, in order to get to the projected carbon zero, a goal is going to take well over 200 years. And the countries of the earth are saying, well, we're going to do it by 2050. And to even try to do it by then is going to bankrupt our countries and create terrific poverty and mass exodus and all sorts of violence in the world while they're making people poor and dead trying. So I think we're pushing it too fast. This whole idea of using our alternate energy sources to fuel the world, we're not ready for that. We don't have electric cargo ships and electric airplanes, and in order to deliver the food like we're doing now, we're going to have to keep going on fossil fuels at this point. And I think that this push by the current governmental powers to force us to live more green at the cost of mass starvation, it's brutal. And I think it's not going to work, and it's going to cause mass violence and war on the planet as a result. People are going to rebel. So I'm worried about the way things are headed right now, frankly. And if you think about it, this making gender into something fluid, where a man can be a woman just by thinking he is, and therefore he can have babies. This is absurdly not true, but it's being taught to our kids in school, and the little, grade school kids are being hypersexualized with gay strip shows and movies of how to have oral sex and stuff. And it's crazy what's going on now. I think what's happening is that gender, which should be something that's very clear, it's black and white, you're a male or you're a female. And there are some crossover points, and those people can decide to be homosexual. I have nothing against that. It's perfectly fine. But this forcing children to change their sex and to cut off their breasts and cut off the muscles of their forearm and make a fake penis, I think this is absurd and is going to do vast damage. But looking behind it, the people who are subjected to this liquid concept of gender will never have babies. And I think that's the bigger goal that's being pushed on us, population reduction. From the technical world in Silicon Valley right up to the elite wanting to have a certain amount of humanity to do the dirt work, but not to have enough individuality to ever create any resistance against their control. And for people who don't have any defined gender, they're real easy to manipulate into doing whatever you want them to do and not putting up a fight. And I'm afraid of this. This looks real scary for this coming up. And I think other countries are looking at America talking about, we don't even know what gender is anymore. They think we're insane. And I think they're right. Anyway, I'm going a little off course here, but that's some of the stuff that's going on in our world right now that's quite worrisome.
It's interesting. So I guess two things I just want to get your reaction on. One is the US, we just passed 8 billion people on Earth. And then two is Elon Musk has been really harping on the fact that we've had a collapsing birth rate, and that really all the population growth you see is due to people living longer, and that ultimately, if we don't get our birth rate up, we'll run into bigger problems. And I was just wondering what your take is on those two things.
It's hard. There is a finite amount of Earth, and the way we're using the resources makes it unwise to keep having more and more people. Jordan Peterson, who worked for the UN for a lot of years, said that it looks like in the best models that we're going to peak out at about 9 billion, and then the population is going to collapse backwards. you know, the problem now, we don't have enough young people to pay for the retirements of the old people, and that's going to be a big problem. You know, when do you retire? How do you support all of these old people in their retirement? You know, you need to have more babies in order to support that. And I don't know. We can't have infinite growth. I understand Elon Musk's point that severely dropping the population too fast is going to have catastrophic effects upon our societies. We aren't going to have enough people to run the businesses and run the technology that we have here. Yeah, I'm kind of 6 of one and half a dozen of the other on that. I think we should have fewer people, but I think we have to do it carefully so that we don't destroy our social and technological functioning in the world. So,
Well,
you know, I'm
just
pulled
going
both
back
ways.
to the moon real quick. I think in 1972, the last time that we went to the moon, you probably would have been about 23, 24, around then. Did you know that that was the last time we would go to the moon?
No, I didn't know that was the last time we would go to the moon. I thought we were starting to do something there, you know, build some sort of a base from which we could then go off into the other planets. And I thought that we'd have a moon base and have some people living there and trying to learn to have a enclosed system that would support life. And I thought that's what was up.
At what point did you kind of realize, you know, that wasn't going to happen?
I don't know, maybe 10 years later or so, when they were cutting back the funding on NASA and not putting money out towards those projects anymore, I realized that it took me a long time. I didn't see anything happening, but I thought that we were still doing that. So it wasn't a clear-cut time where I said, oh, they're not doing that anymore. It just became evident when I became aware of the massive funding cuts of NASA. And I don't remember exactly what year that was.
You know, this decade, the 2020s, I think is really going to be an inflection point for us in space. And I want to get your take on this. I think the 2020s are going to be what the people in the 1960s thought the 1970s would be.
Uh-huh. I hope so. I hope that we can stop spending our time and stop spending our time fighting wars and using up the national economy on war. I'm a little concerned that it looks like the policy of the elite is to bankrupt the dollar so that we will not have a dollar anymore and that we'll only have electronic cash that they will control. And I'm afraid this, you know, our current administration's policy is to just print money and spend it. And we're going trillions and trillions and trillions into debt. And at some point, our debt's going to be called. You know, we owe most of it to China. And at which point the dollar will be worthless and everyone's savings will be worthless. And we won't have money for things like going off into space. I'm concerned that that's part of what's our future would be, that the funding, because we're spending so lavishly on social projects with money that's borrowed and made out of thin air, that the future generations are going to have to pay back or else simply completely bankrupt the US dollar, which seems like the more likely scenario. So if that's the case, how are we going to fund going off into space? Is this going to be the elite decide whether those projects are worthwhile or not, and they do it while everybody else are slaves here on Earth? I don't know. It looks scary right now.
It does. It does. I mean, if you think about, you know, how the dollar has been really a global constant for so long.
Yeah, it has. But what's going to come of that? I know we already have other countries having their petrodollars or having other currencies. You know, Libya had a vast amount of gold from their oil, and Gaddafi said, well, we're going to create a new currency based on gold. You know, that actually had a physical backing behind it. And within a year, our Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, invaded Libya and executed him, and we stole the gold. So it doesn't look like those in power want to have something like a real currency in the world, because that would defeat the dollar completely. I'm rather ashamed to be American, actually, when people ask me. And I still have American friends who say, well, at least we live in the one country where you can be free. And I spent half of my life living in Europe, and America is not a free country. My goodness, not. I mean, even like when I lived in Switzerland, I was allowed to import anything that wasn't expressly illegal, including drugs or technology. In America, like in China, in comparison, you can only import things that are deemed to be legal by the government, and everything else is automatically forbidden. So in Switzerland, if anything, there's not a law in the books forbidding something, then it's allowed. In China, unless something has in the books that says it's allowed, it's forbidden. And I think we're leaning towards that model where it's automatically forbidden. And that's scary to me. So we're not in any way the freest country in the world. But I'm digressing a little. What was the point you wanted to ask?
Well, I think that covers that point. But if you project out like 200 years in the future, do you think we make it? What does 200 years in the future look like to you?
Either we'll probably get segmented into little groups that are run by a computer living in socialist colonies here and there on the earth. That's my scary scenario, where the computers are well enough advanced that they can take care of us and replenish themselves and control small groups of humans under socialist rule. Or my positive dream is that we learn to have alternate sources of energy and we don't have to work anymore, but we actually can be motivated enough to improve our lot. I'm worried now that social help given to people tends to make them lazy, as long as they have enough money to buy their liquor and something to eat, and they don't have to work forever because the government's supporting them. So having a social system that's supporting us to handle that. I'd like to see it where people are actually spending their lives doing things that they really love to do, improving their lot and the lot of their neighbors. And I'd like to dream of a future in which that is what we do. I don't see the pathway to it yet. There's a lot of hurdles to get over, but on the positive end, I see humanity not having to work at menial jobs. We'll have enough automation to take care of that we can survive, but we are stimulated enough in improving that we can do our art and our creation and our inventions and to improve the lot of the planet and the people on it. So 200 years, if we have developed new energy sources, we probably will be able to move ourselves through the cosmos, probably at higher than light speed with technologies that we don't know yet. And so we'll actually be able to colonize places quite distant, other solar systems, find other planets similar to Earth that we can colonize. I think that's probably a scenario that's possible for humanity if we can get out of the self-destructive tendencies of isolation and egotism.
As you were talking, I thought about a series of causes and effects. I came across my mind. I wanted to run by you. Adversity and challenges create strength. Strength creates comfort. Comfort creates weakness. Weakness creates adversity and challenges.
Yeah, and it's cyclic. It's true when you get, but it seems that, getting fat and lazy, if you've managed to save up enough money and enough wealth that you can reduce yourself to being useless all of your life until you die, that the adversity you propose that comes out of being flabby and soft is going to be adversities of things like health and your physical body strength. And how many of us will actually be motivated by that to renovate themselves? I don't know. I've made it a challenge for myself, renovating myself. I'm just about as strong as I've ever been in my life, and I'm pretty old now. And I by using my biohacking techniques, I'm lean and fit and strong and can do crazy things that only kids do, like surfing, and requires swift reflexes and great balance and stuff. And that's possible, but how many people are actually trying even to do that? It seems that humanity mostly right now, I think part of it is that our government has defined our healthy foods to include high carb, low fat diet. And I think that's has been the cause of this huge obesity and diabetes epidemic in the United States. That Actually, it would be way healthier for us to have fats as our main fuel and not so many carbs. You know, we're set up so that when the fruit is ripe on the tree is when autumn is, i.e., before winter, where you're not going to have food. And so built into us is this: if there's fruit on the tree, I'm going to eat as much of it as I can to put on some fat to survive winter. And that's built into us throughout our evolutionary history. So given the free realm of sugar, free carbs, people just eat and eat and eat it because that's built into us. If there's sugar around, you can eat it and store up some fat because that's necessary for survival. But it's not necessary for survival now because we always have food available. And the result is that our evolutionary habits have led to incredible obesity. Now, frankly, I've found the brain works better on oils than it does on carbs. Carbs are the main sugars that your body lives on and your brain lives on. But if you don't eat sugar and you fast, the body goes, oh my God, I'm going to have to turn my fat into fuel, and creates ketones. You can get the feel of that if you start out your day after your extended fasting, your intermittent fasting, with a weak cup of coffee that has a lot of butter and coconut fat in it. And that oil produces ketones that fuels your brain, and your brain works better on ketones than it does on sugar. And you can think more clearly, you can think more swiftly. And most people don't know that because they give themselves endless supplies of carbs every day. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges, to get people off this sugar and even complex carb focus in their diet, get them back eating, things that grow. If there's 73 ingredients on the label, it's probably not food you should eat.
Simpler is better.
Yeah. In eating further down the food chain, I like to eat fish, but I mostly eat sardines. They don't eat littler fish and concentrate mercury like the big fish we enjoy. I mean, swordfish has like 200 times as much mercury per ounce than a sardine has. So eating low on the food chain makes a lot of sense.
So I'd like to take that 200-year question and turn it around on you. Imagine that instead of living in the 2020s, you live in the 2220s, 200 years in the future. What do you think would be remembered in 200 years about this decade?
People would look back and say, you mean they knew what they were doing and they kept doing it anyway? In amazement. They knew they were destroying the environment. They knew they were using up the raw materials of the earth at a much irreplaceable rate, and they kept on doing it anyway. I think that will be one of the big questions. Were they so stupid? How could they not have seen that and changed their behavior sooner?
Sort of like cutting down a last tree on Easter Island, that type of thing.
Yeah, finding the remnants of a culture. Yeah, I think that if you look back, let's look back to Galileo's time. At that time, people believed the church, and the church had control of the mind of humanity. And if you believed something that was not doctrine of the church, you'd go to hell forever. And they believed that. So they kept their minds in what was allowed by the church. And the church embraced Aristotle and said, what he wrote is true. And Aristotle was not a scientist as we think of it today. He made all of his determinations by pure logic. So, for example, he said an object that is twice as heavy falls twice as fast, which sounds like really good logic. And the church said, yes, Aristotle says that's true. And Galileo climbed up the Tower of Pisa with a 90-pound ball and a 1-pound ball and dropped them, and they hit the ground at the same time. The people looking at it thought, well, if I believe my eyes, I will be damned to hell for all eternity. So it must be an optical illusion. That didn't happen. And for us, that seems crazy. How could they think like that? And I think in the future, they look back on our policies today as just that kind of crazy that's unimaginable. How could they keep using up the last of the oil when it was about to run out?
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I had one more question for you. If you could, would you take a trip to space?
Yes. I don't have to ask. I'd love it.
How far would you go? Just to orbit, to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
Not unless I had a pretty darn good garden there so that the food was good. I really like good food, and the idea of eating, synthetically concentrated or whatever on Mars doesn't appeal real. I mean, if you're talking about a way in the future where we could go much further and there was other hospitable planets, I would go there and go find out what do people eat on the planets around Alpha Centauri and further solar events. But I would love to visit Mars and I would love to participate in that, but I think I'd like to come back and enjoy the fruits of Earth while they're still so delicious.
That makes sense. Well, Dr. Frost, those were pretty much the questions I had. I know we covered a wide range of topics, but is there something that maybe you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Yes, the thing of child home education. What's going on in our schools today is so perverse. The children being taught about sex at a baby age and encouraged to have alternate forms of sex and not prohibiting being brutalized and sexually brutalized by adults. And this whole thing seems to me so perverse that I'd like to see homeschooling take more of a hold on the population as a counterpart to the absurd and quite damaging politics of today in terms of schooling. And
that better schools hopefully make for better people. And
yes, I'd like to see us put money into having nearly free education. The people that we educate are going to be running our world, so give them the best education possible. I mean, in Germany, they pay the school teachers a really good salary. They don't in America. So people who are interested in living well don't become school teachers unless they're terribly altruistic, and then they suffer for it. And I think that we should fund the school teachers far better and make education far cheaper so that everyone has access to education. Another thing, if you want to make someone stupid for their whole life, you can. You just don't give them the proper nutrients in the first 2 years of their life. So I think one of the best things we can do for our whole planet is to make sure that little children are being well fed. Oh, I became the host. I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't see you anymore. I don't hear you either. I think we've lost our connection. Well, if you hear me, I'll say my farewell now, and we'll go on. I see a 2024 picture. Are you coming back?
Sorry.
Hey.
Yeah,
there you go. Your flange. I'm hearing you.
Well, yes. Somehow I got disconnected, and then it reconnected. Maybe something to do with the network here.
Yeah,
but I wanted to ask you, do you differentiate any? I mean, like I think between schooling and education.
What is your question?
Oh, I feel like there's a difference between education and schooling. Like we spending time in a classroom may not actually be the best education. Working on a farm with your hands, building stuff. That seems like a far richer education than what a lot of kids get by just having to read and put marks on papers and that type of thing.
Well, our current educational system was designed in order to train children to work in factories. That's just history. Sitting still, not making noise, staying still for a long time, working for long periods of time. That's what you have to do if you work in a factory. And so that's how we were designed. That's how our school system was designed. And it terribly needs updating. Practical education, where you're learning to do the things you're going to do in life. Make furniture, make a house, grow food, cook food, make love, have a partnership with people, do your own finances. Almost no one learns these things in school, and those are the things you're going to need for your life. So I think that's very, very important that we change our education to actually enable our children to succeed in life rather than to succeed in factory work.
I feel like in a school that every job should be done by a student, be it from preparing the food, repairing the building, to cleaning up. Then they actually get real experience.
Yep. I think you're right. And as they get a little older, being the assistant teachers and stuff and teaching the younger kids. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We
And
need
you know, that should make it cheaper too.
yeah, yes. Education should include the practical activities that you need to do in life. It shouldn't just be theoretical.
Have the students plan the menus, order the food and raw ingredients, see that it's cooked, you know, put together the roster of who's going to clean up afterwards, and you know, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think that would be an excellent way. Our Montessori school is a step in that direction. They do have the kids outdoors and doing practical things, learning to garden, etc. I think that probably the most revolutionary act for humans today is to grow their own food. That will free us from dependence upon the delivery of food to our door and all of the energy requirements that causes.
Absolutely. Well,
Thanks.
pleasure
Send
to
me a
speak
link.
to you today.
I'd love to see this. Yeah, send me a link to this show. I'd like to share it with my friends.
I will do that. Thank you so much, Dr. Frost, and I hope you catch a big wave.
I enjoyed it greatly, Nathan. Until next time.
Till next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.